Okay, we are live and we're back, and we have Tim Kernell here, who is going to be talking about getting data sort of on and off using Tellor, right?
That's right. Um,
Cool. Okay, let me just if we just 1 second here, because there's a few people that might still be coming in, because what we've done, we had everything kind of running back to back as a single stream, and then we kind of got ahead of ourselves slightly and ended up with a bit of space, so we kind of stopped and restarted the stream. So I just want to make sure that I think we've got some people already in. Hopefully, hopefully people can hear you. Yeah, it looks like your sound's coming through. Okay. Um, Great. If people in the chat could just let me know they can hear myself and Tim. Um,
test, test.
um, hopefully, some people in there. Looks good. We've got some people in already. Cool. Yep, and got confirmation that's all volumes all good. So great. Right. Well, Tim, great to meet you. I don't think we've met yet. So I don't know if you want to give just a quick introduction to yourself, and then kind of jump into your talk.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you as well. And so I'm Tim, and I work for the Tellor Oracle protocol as a Solidity developer. Um, and I am just going to be walking you all through how to integrate the Tellor Oracle into your smart contracts. Um, So, how to connect your contract to the Tellor Oracle, how to retrieve data, and then how to actually request the data. And so, let's begin. So, I've put together a video demo just to make sure nothing goes haywire in a live demo. Um, so, just as a high level overview, we'll be showing you how to install the Using Teller user library, which really just includes a contract that you inherit into your contract, and it provides multiple getter functions for retrieving data. Um, so I'll show you how to get that hooked up. I'll show you how to um, actually set your contract up to retrieve the specific data that you want. um, we'll show some best practices for actually securely using the Oracle. Um, we'll deploy the contract, and then we'll actually add a tip, which is the way you actually request data, by incentivizing data providers to report your requested data. So let's start the demo here. And so here's just a basic framework, simple contract, which will just be retrieving data. Um, and I'm showing you this in the Remix kind of Solidity IDE, um, just because that will allow us to interact with our contracts. Um, but actually, before this step, when you're developing locally, you will first have to have npm install using Tellor. So that's all lowercase, npm install using Tellor, an npm package, and that just includes this contract that we'll be importing and inheriting. So once you've npm installed the using Tellor library, then you can import it into your contract, and you will inherit using Tellor into your contract as well. Um, you'll also pass the Tellor Oracle address into your constructor. And you can see how that's done here. And then we're just going to set up a simple function which reads a Bitcoin price. And so to do that, we need to create the unique identifier for the Bitcoin spot price. So here you'll see how we do that. First, you create what's known as query data, and that's a bytes representation of your unique query identifier. And so with the Tellor Oracle, you have many different, any type of data you can request. So we create these unique data specifications, and the most common one is the spot price. So for the spot price query type, you have two different arguments, the asset and the currency. So in this case, our asset will be Bitcoin or BTC, and then the currency will be USD. And so you form your query data starting with these arguments, BTC, USD, and then you complete the query data by then encoding the query type string spot price together with those query data arguments. And that gives you your query data. And then to get our query ID, we will hash that query data. And that just gives us a unique identifier of a fixed size, bytes 32. And now we can take that information to actually retrieve our desired data from the Tellor Oracle. So now we'll be using one function, a getter function that's provided with the using Tellor library. That's going to be the get data before function, which returns a value. That was the value that was reported to the Oracle, and then the timestamp at which that value was submitted on chain. And the get data before function takes two arguments, and it'll take your query ID, the unique identifier, and then it will take a timestamp. So this function will go and retrieve the latest value that was submitted before this inputted timestamp. So you'll see that we are using the current block timestamp minus 15 minutes. So we are building in a buffer time. And this is showing best practices for using the Tellor Oracle, because the security of this Oracle depends on anyone coming and submitting a stake to have the ability to submit data, and then anyone else can come in and pay a dispute fee to challenge any piece of data that was reported on chain. And then a dispute process starts, and Tellor stakeholders vote on the validity of the submitted data. So you build in this buffer time when you're retrieving data, because you want to allow time for people to monitor and dispute any bad data. And that doesn't necessarily happen immediately. So you want to build in that buffer safety period. And I'm choosing 15 minutes here. The correct amount of time to use really depends on your use case, depends on the chain that you're operating on. And it could depend on how much value is being secured by your protocol and by the data that is being read by the Oracle. So that is one big piece of best practices when using the Tellor Oracle. And then we're going to check, now that we've retrieved some data, we're going to check that some data was actually retrieved. So you just assert that the timestamp retrieved is not equal to 0. And also, depending on your use case, it's often best practice to check how old the data that was retrieved is. So, a lot of times for a spot price, for those use cases, a spot price expires. It's not useful after a certain amount of time. So it's often good to check that it's not too old. And then once we've passed those checks, we decode the returned data. So all Tellor data is in bytes format. And so then it can really represent any type of data. You can encode any type of data into bytes format. And so in this case, a spot price is a UNT 256 encoded into bytes. So then we are going to decode our Bitcoin price using ABI decode, and we save it to this global BTC price variable. And so that was our simple Oracle user contract. So now that we have that, we are going to deploy this contract. And remember, in our constructor, we needed the Tellor Oracle address. So to deploy our contract, we will need that address. And you can get that from our Tellor documentation, docs.tellor.io. And you can go to this contracts reference page. And at the very bottom, you'll see the FVM hyperspace testnet contract addresses. So for our user contract here, we will need the Oracle address. So we'll just need this B2C address. And now we're not going to wait for that contract to actually deploy. Next, we need to add a tip to actually request the Bitcoin price. So on testnet, for the token, we are using this Tellor Playground contract, which it also includes a whole Playground Oracle environment. But in this case, we are going to use the Tellor Flex Oracle contract, but the Tellor Playground as the token. So again, you can find that Tellor Playground address at the contracts reference page in the docs. And so you can connect the Playground to Remix so you can interact with the contract. And we want to acquire some tokens. So there's a faucet function in the Playground. And once we have some test TRB tokens, we can call the approve function because we want to add a tip to another function or another contract, the Tellor AutoPay contract, which handles tipping reports and incentivizing data. So we need to call the typical ERC20 approve function to allow the AutoPay contract to take some of our tokens. So we'll call this approve function again in this Tellor Playground contract. And we had already retrieved the AutoPay address from the references page in the docs again. And once the token spending is approved, we can go to the AutoPay contract and we will call this tip function. And so for the tip function, we need 3 arguments: the query ID, the query data and the amount. So remember, we saw the query ID and the query data when we were creating our user contract. So you can either generate that query ID and query data in Solidity, or we also have a query ID builder tool. You can find that on our website at Tellor.io. I think you can see it under tools, or you can see it at this URL here, querybuilder.tellor.io. And this just lets you input whatever inputs you need for your query data, and you can generate the query data and the query ID. So we're inputting B2C USD, and we're going to use these as inputs to our tip function call. And then we need to input an amount. So we're just going to tip one test TRB. And that's about the end of the demo. So yeah, just to review, we just went over installing the using Tellor library with npm install using Tellor. And again, that library basically just includes a contract with multiple getter functions for easily retrieving Oracle data from Tellor. We showed how to then connect that contract to your own contract. You input the Tellor Oracle address into your constructor, and then you can you'll need to form your query ID and query data in order to specify exactly what data you need in your contract. And then we showed retrieving the data from the Oracle and using best practices with the get data before function, and then some further best practices when looking at the data that you actually retrieved. Then we deployed our contract, and then we went over adding a tip in the hyperspace test environment using the Tellor Playground as your token, and then calling the approve function, and then going over to the autopay contract and adding a tip to actually specify the data that you want and incentivizing data providers to submit your data. And yeah, that's the end of the demo. And cool. At this point, I'd welcome any questions.
Yeah, well, we've just had a question come in from Mega Make here that's asked, can you link to a search for available queries? Or do we need to find it here? And they've got a link there. I don't know if you can see the chat there, a link to the GitHub Tellor.io data specs. And there's a list of data specs here for various things, gas prices, Filecoin deal status, etc., etc. Is that where they would go, or is there somewhere else? And can they add user-made queries as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The data specs is just about the right place to look. So that is where anyone can come and specify a new data type, and that repo will show all of the data types that someone has already created. So that is a great place to look. Again, that is on the Tellor GitHub, and it's called the data specs. That's what the repo is called. And the second question, yes, anyone can create any data type. So the Tellor Oracle is very flexible. So you just have to be able to specify some kind of very specific data that you want. We often say publicly verifiable data is what's appropriate for the Tellor Oracle.
But I've just had a look there, and there's a Filecoin deal status uh, data type there, which is pretty cool. Obviously, that'd be a good one that people might want to play around with in the context of Filecoin. If people are creating their own data specs, then how do you get people to actually report that data back? Is it just by the tip? Is that the point? But how do they discover that there's things that need reporting on? If I just come up with a new data type, I want the time of the next bus from such and such a bus station or whatever, how do people find out to report on that data?
Yeah. So, you know, technically, you could just um, create that data specs document and then just start requesting the data. There's no technical reason you have to go through, you know, the Tellor team as a gatekeeper or the Tellor community even as a gatekeeper. But it is recommended to talk to the Tellor team and or go into our public Discord, and um, you can make a message in the reporters channel that, hey, there's this data type that I'm going to be using, and I'd love if people would provide that data. Um, so yeah, it would be good to talk to the Teller team, and we can help get your data type integrated into our reporter software, um, which is just, it's called Telliot, and it's a Python client that reports data automatically. Um, and that's just something we provide as the Teller team, and it makes it easy for anyone in the community to relatively easily get up and running reporting data. But you definitely don't have to use that software to report data to Teller. But yeah, it would be best to communicate to make things easier, to communicate to the Teller team and to the community that this data exists.
Okay, cool. Great. And I see, so on the actual, within this FEM Dataverse Hackathon, Tellor have some bounties up. So there's a prize pool of $2,500 for up to the top 10 best teams, capped at $1,000 per team. So there's definitely an incentive there to start checking out Tellor and building stuff on it. As I mentioned, there is a Filecoin deal status bit there, so that could be of interest with perhaps anything you're building on Filecoin and that side of things. So yeah, that all seems pretty cool. Is there any other bits and pieces you wanted to cover? I'm just looking to see if there's any more questions here. How do we reach out to you directly, Tim? Are you on Twitter? Somebody asks. Danjowski.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at heavychain04. Um, heavy chain just spelled like the words 04.
Okay.
And you can also see me in the Teller Discord as well, in the public Discord, again with the same name, Heavy Chain.
Okay, and that's generally where the community hangs out. Then is in the Discord.
That's our main place. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
where the
Cool.
action
So
happens.
if people are needing help specifically with Teller and want to find out help from the community, then that's where to go. And I presume you can there's a link to that from from Teller.io somewhere. I'm guessing. Get to the
Yeah,
Discord.
there should be. I think it's at the top right. You can find our Discord
Yeah.
link.
Yeah. Teller.io. Yeah. There's a link at the
Yeah.
top there. Cool. Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Tim. So next coming up. Sorry, is there anything?
Thank you very much. Yeah. I guess what
Okay,
yeah, the
cool.
last thing is I didn't mention the bounties specifically, just or the requirements for them. But you basically have to show what we went over
Yeah. Do you
in
wanna
this
cover that?
demo
We
today.
got a few more minutes. Yeah, we got a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll just have to show a link to um, your own project that integrates Teller, the using Teller NPM package, and your project should be able to pull in some data like we showed in this demo. And then the other piece is showing a transaction hash for having added a tip. So you'll just want to go to the autopay contract on Hyperspace testnet and add a tip for the specific data that your contract needs. And I think that should be it.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Well, thanks a lot then, Tim. And yeah, thanks for coming on. And I look forward to seeing, I'm sure you do as well, seeing what people build as part of this hackathon with Tellor. I haven't had a chance to kind
Absolutely.
of actually play with Tellor myself, but it's one of the ones that's kind of on my to-do list to have a play with, and so I'm looking forward to it. So this has been really helpful for me personally to see what the steps are, and I'll probably try going through the same steps myself as well as part of it.
Awesome. That's good to hear. We'd love to have you
Cool.
try it out, and anyone listening, thanks for listening. And we're excited to see what you can
Yeah.
build. And I'll
Great.
be in the
Fantastic.
the sponsor channel for Tellor to help with any needs you have. So thanks everyone.
Cool. Okay. Thanks a lot then, Tim.